For those in the know, this is Maya. It's a 3D program. We can use this to help us very, very quickly generate like the perspective and some lighting scenarios that will help us make thumbnails quicker and look more compelling and have more interesting compositions, okay? And we're going to do it, I'm going to do it all with just cubes, nothing else. So I'm going to create one cube here. So the homework, obviously, and I'm going to give you all of the rest of the session after the break to work on the homework, because I'm going to be sort of critiquing it and going around next week on this. The homework was to illustrate that kind of final scene from that Lovecraft short story, Dagon, or Dagon, however it's pronounced. And spoiler, yeah, it's a sort of a monolith kind of structure, statue with a big slimy monster kind of hugging it. So what I want to do then, I want to create a ground plane out of a cube, like this. I'm not going to even bother doing this to scale. Then I'm going to create another cube, which is going to be my sort of monolith. So I'm going to build it up a bit like this. Just want to roughly get it looking right. I'm going to stick that in the center. I'm going to position my camera to figure out where all this should go. And let's make another one. Now I'm going to build up a kind of cliff kind of walls. That. I'm going to freeze this. By the way, you're going to run into, when you start, because Maya's really terrible, when you start scaling stuff in a non-uniform way, which means sort of you're scaling it more in one way than the other way, Maya then starts to get a little bit annoying in the way that you want to then move it. So you scale it like this, and it sometimes starts behaving horribly, especially, let's put this to object. So you put this to object. It's behaving all right at the moment. If you start finding that you've scaled some stuff in a non-uniform way, and when you try and move it, say in one axis, it starts moving like super slowly or not in the right direction, just freeze the transformations. It's that little button up there. So I'm just going to sort of stack up some cubes and rotate them to sort of give me a sort of simulated sort of sea wall or sort of cliff wall, something like that. Oh yeah, there you go. It's starting to behave in a horrible way like that. So if I freeze that, start moving like this. Although, to be honest, I've messed up the axes. But it doesn't matter, because again, this is just, we're just blocking stuff out. Oops. I'm just going to do like this, and then I'm going to sort of, I'm going to put my little frame on in Maya. This lets me see actually the framing of it. I'm going to zoom in like this. I'm going to get nice and low, because I want it to look dramatic. But I want a bit of sort of, I want to create that impression, if I remember correctly, from the story, like the sailor, the kind of guy is kind of sort of spying on this, witnessing this from a hiding place, I think. But either way, I just want to create some kind of excuse for a little bit of framing to happen just here. So I'm going to put my camera here. I'm going to position my sort of obelisk on this kind of third part of the image, because I'm remembering my composition. I'm going to press this button here that will bookmark that camera position. So now when I move away from here, I don't have to worry about losing that camera position. I'm going to duplicate this one, move this over here. Go back to my bookmark. Yeah, so what I want is something sort of goes like this, as if I'm sort of sneaking out from behind something to look at the obelisk. Right. But I'm going to use this as well to give me an idea for the lighting. So I'm going to create a light by going to rendering, direct light in this case, because I'm not going to do any rendering in Arnold, any proper fancy rendering. I'm going to literally screen grab what's in Maya. And I can turn this button on, which activates lights, turn this button on, which activates shadows, and this button on, which activates ambient occlusion, which is just, if you haven't done CGI, ambient occlusion is these little soft, little contact shadows. Stuff like that. It's a bit gross in the viewport, but again, we're just using it as a guide. So I'm going to rotate. Oh, you see, this is automatically giving me some ideas. So imagine if the shadow was being, a shadow was being cast against the obelisk and sort of cutting off the top part of it in light, but the rest of it was in shadow. I can fiddle around and find a nice kind of position. I'm also going to create this ambient light, which is going to make everything too bright. But then straight away, I'm just going to bring that value down a little bit, or quite a lot, to be honest. So it's more like that, maybe even more so. And now I'm going to just move this around and go, okay, where does it look good? Yes, something like that. Now I can then imagine the monster, I don't know, climbing over the edge just here. I can add that later. I'm going to tweak my camera angle because I like it looking maybe a bit like that. So I'm going to hide the lights by going to show lights. I don't see the lights anymore. And I'm just going to hit print screen and take it into Photoshop. So if I go new, if you do print screen and then you go straight into Photoshop and you go new, by default it's going to remember the size of the image and give you that as the clipboard. So this of course records both my monitors as if it was one massive great big monitor, so we'll have to crop it out. So I go like this and I'm going to just crop this and make it bigger like this. This is what I'm going to use now as a base to paint over to figure out my actual kind of thumbnail. So I'm going to put a layer just here. Go to brush mode. First things first, like everything, just going to block in a sky. Oops, yellow. I don't want it yellow. Zero saturation. Darker, like this. I'm going to turn that off actually just for a moment. I go to this brush and again I'm going to think in terms of working from the back coming forwards and just copying kind of what I see. So I'm going to select this and make it a bit darker and begin blocking this out. But these are all cubes, but they're only there just to show me the rough kind of shape. What I'm actually going to do is kind of make more mountainy kind of shapes like this. Actually, no, I've gone too quick. What I'm going to do first, actually, is I'm actually going to trace over the top. This will work better, I think. So I'm going to get this, turn it kind of nice and small. So I'm going to go, okay, well, this is the rough idea. So this is going to be my kind of obelisk kind of shape. I'm going to put maybe a little bit of stones down here, like that. This is going to be my extreme foreground, which is not going to be a cube. It's just going to be kind of like a rocky kind of surface. And then I'm going to do the cliff walls like this. Maybe some secondary cliff walls that kind of compositionally lead us towards this. Maybe some stuff in the foreground, more rocks. Again, not putting rocks everywhere, trying to cluster them. And then I know what the shadows are kind of doing. So the shadow kind of goes like this. And I've got this nice big shadow in the foreground, which again really, really helps me compositionally. So I kind of do that. So if I take off, I've got a sketch now already. And that was easy. And I've got everything placed in the right 3D space. And I didn't have to worry about perspective, right? Now you can then use this sketch now, set this sketch to multiply. So anything I do underneath here, that sketch is always going to show through. That's basically what multiply is going to do. So this time I'm actually going to do my sky on this layer, And I'm going to fill the whole thing with kind of a grey because I hate working pure white. So yeah, this is going to be sort of a rough kind of light source here. It's going to get darker over here, maybe darker still. I'm going to do this all on one layer as well. I'm not too fussed about this. Let's go for this brush and now start blocking in these background mountains. Remember, make it a little bit darker as you come forwards. So these ones get a darker value. I want this big foreground one to be almost pitch black, to be honest, so I'm going to go pretty dark on this. Let's work on, we also want a kind of, I'm going to start picking just values straight from here. I'm not going to start making, I'm going to draw in this shadow. And obviously this obelisk has got to be a bit darker than here. I'm going to give it a slightly lit and dark side. So darker still. Actually, I'm going to go to, once I've got to about this point, I'm going to start using this super opaque brush here. Add in the details, put in the shadow. You get to this kind of point, you unhide this, you unhide your sketch, it's going to look super loose and sloppy, but it doesn't matter, it's getting you there. Now, you can begin to work on top of this. So, you've got your rough idea down, you can select this. Now you can start actually coming up with more interesting, cliffy kind of feel to it. You can tidy up the edges. And you can just start, now you can start just making it up as you go along. Because it doesn't matter now. Now you've got the thumbnail feeling like it exists in a 3D space. It still looks painterly. And all because you spent maybe 5 minutes at most blocking out something like that, right? And then it took a few seconds for you to do a little trace over the top. And then you just start filling it in with value. And you end up with this. And you just carry on a little bit more. And that's all your thumbnail needs to be. Because your thumbnail really is little. And you've got a page. Loads of these. And you can generate another one. Maybe you think, oh, well, I don't really like that kind of look. You know what I want? Actually, I was talking again with someone yesterday about camera lenses. The CG behaves like a real kind of camera. So you can change what's called the focal length. It's a bit like changing the lens, how much you zoom in and out. So you can select your camera by pressing this little button. You can go to either. You can either go to the channel box here, or you can go to the attribute one here, whatever floats your boat. Focal length at the moment is a 35mm focal length. So if you click on that and highlight it, now if you hover in the viewport and hold your middle mouse button down, you can change that focal length to make it like an extreme wide-angle lens, which has a completely different feel to a zoomed-in kind of lens. Sometimes putting on the wireframe on preview can help clear up stuff. Or you can zoom in a lot. When you zoom in a lot, you're going to flatten the perspective. It's going to feel different again. Maybe, yeah. In fact, this is a valuable thing to bear in mind. If you want to make something look big, again, one of the ways to make something look big is to not show all of it. You can't see all of a skyscraper when you're walking along the street. You can just see a bit of it, and that's why it feels so massive. So sometimes using the focal length and zooming in and then cropping it so that you can't see the top of that monolith. The important thing is all the perspectives there, all the shadow information's there for you to make something in Photoshop. And then you could go, you know what would look really cool is if you were looking down at it, maybe a helicopter shot. Print screen into Photoshop, trace over the top. Add your details, add the monster in. There you go, right? I want you to experiment trying with that. If you think that's too difficult, fair play, but let me know. Tell me. Tell me exactly the bit that you're struggling with, and I'll help you, okay? Don't just completely ignore it and try and draw all these complicated 3D kind of shapes and then fail. And then go, oh, like that, right? Good. So, oh, Tom, yeah?
Are we allowed to use textured photographs in the thing, or does it have to be
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think at this stage, at this pure composition thumbnail stage, you can use photographs, but I wouldn't use them for texture, because at this stage, you're not interested in texture. All this stage is about is the composition, which is normally made of where is the camera in relation to the objects? What is the light kind of doing? Now, you can use a photo, say you're on, I don't know, I mean, let's go on to here. I'm going to go to Flickr, although it's probably going to come up with this annoying pop-up saying, hey, do you want to log in and stuff like that. Let's put Muddy Cliffs Beach. Oh, that could work actually. Yes, it is an art. You're right, Lewis. A really skilled reference searcher knows how to find their stuff with the minimum amount of time. I like Flickr. I might have mentioned this before. Flickr's so really good because if you change it to Creative Commons, then you can feel ethically and morally pure as you use their photos as your inspiration and reference. And also, you know for sure you can download a fairly high resolution version of it. Rather than Google, where you're having to go into advanced search, specify that you want something over 2 megapixels, and it doesn't even necessarily give you that, and also will give you loads of images with stock photo kind of watermarks all over it. But Tom, you can use reference photography. You can look at this and go, oh, actually, this looks promising. This looks totally like you could have the monolith kind of coming out of this sort of pool at an angle. So I'm going to use that, and I'll start painting over the top of it, only to get your perspective right and to get the feel of the composition right. You're not just doing a trace over because you want to replicate that photo. You're just using that photo to help you establish that 3D space without you stressing about it, okay? Good. Right, so I'm going to stop the recording.